Did any of the following actually happen as described in these scary stories? I think we have multiple dogmen on our land. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my Wisconsin family and I have been plagued this year by rapping and knocking sounds that seem to come from outside our house at night. We thought we had ghosts and even invited a paranormal research group out to investigate. But when my Uncle Lenny was driving over to visit us back in the summer, he told us he saw what looked to him like a very tall-eared werewolf slapping the outside corner of our house, then racing off on his hind legs to the nearby woods. Lenny claimed it ducked behind a tree, then peeked out, as if hoping that he would draw someone out of the house. Lenny didn't think that the creature would want to draw us out in order to invite us to tea. If a predator is trying to draw you out of your safe spot, that predator must be looking to satisfy his hunger, or one of his hungers anyway. Although it took a few days to sink in, we all pretty much accepted what Uncle Lenny told us, and we realized that we didn't have a ghost. We had a dogman. After that, instead of smudging our house and hanging crosses on our walls, we began to look out the window when we heard strange sounds. Usually, when we peered out into the night, we saw very little other than our own reflection on the glass. So, the Dogman became a topic of discussion in the house. We had a Dogman. Our relatives called asking us about the Dogman. It became accepted that there was a Dogman either living on our property or at least regularly passing through it. And then, one night, our house got bumped loudly from outside from two different corners almost at once. It was from opposite sides of the house, and there's no way that it was one creature or person or entity making both sounds. And yet the bumps were so similar that it was clearly the same kind of entity bumping us, and it was obvious they were doing it for the same reason, whatever that might have been. We wondered if it were possible that we had more than one Dogman on the property, and that is honestly a truly frightening notion for every one of us. One Dogman is scary, but there are more of us than it, so if we stick close to the house and avoid milling about at night, then we're probably safe from it for the most part. Once you introduce a second Dogman, then you also introduce the possibility that there could be 3 or 4 or 5 or a dozen. It's a truly chilling notion. Then came my daughter, who we can call Sally's sighting. She told us that she woke up after hearing a voice in her head telling her to look out the window. She got up and looked down out of her bedroom window at the backyard and saw an albino, or at least a very lightly colored, hairy dog run upright across the backyard in a quick flash before it disappeared into the woods. She said she made a sound that was just south of a scream, managing to stifle herself at the last second so that she didn't wake the house up. After all, she wasn't in danger. She had just been startled by what she had seen. We got on Zoom with Uncle Lenny, and he compared notes with Sally and us. He said the creature he saw was definitely very darkly colored. There could be no doubt that the one Sally saw was a very different Dogman. So at that point we knew for a fact that we have at least 2 of the creatures, and that means there could be any number of them. They might be breeding in the area. I want it known that I have lived in this home my entire 47 years, and it was my parents' home before it was mine. We never, and I repeat, never, have experienced anything like this Dogman stuff ever before the year 2020. We never have seen a Bigfoot. We don't have ghosts. We haven't been abducted by UFOs, as far as any of us can remember. And then suddenly, out of the blue, this. I don't know how or why it started, and I don't know if it's here to stay or if it will disappear as suddenly as it arrived. All I know is, I think we have multiple dogmen on our land. Don't go anywhere. We've got another all-new Dogman story next called Dogman Used My Basement. But first I want to thank today's executive producer, Shelia Roberts. Shelia, I can really feel ya. If measuring in kilowatts or megahertz, try Shelia Paulette Roberts. Please join us and thank you, Ms. Roberts, for making this episode possible. Shelia gets to watch our secret, uncensored, scary stories each Sunday night. Stories far too wild to tell on this channel. You can too. Just join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com or become a channel member by clicking the join link below. And now, the story from today's thumbnail, which we call Dogman Used Our Basement. Dear Scary Stories NYC, before I begin this narrative for you, I would like to say that in spite of what I'm about to tell you, my family and I are grateful for all we've got right now, and none of this is meant as us asking anyone to feel sorry for us. We know we're lucky to have our health, to have enough wealth to get us by, and to have each other. The reason we're writing you, though, is to tell you about the most terrifying thing that ever happened to any of us. I'm going to tell you about how we had a dogman infestation in our own basement. My family and I locked up one of our homes back when the pandemic hit the USA and had been living in the other one, which had seemed more rural when this began. We thought we'd be there a few weeks or a month, but everybody remembers how that went. More recently, the restrictions on the neighborhood of the house we had been staying in became more severe, so we opted to move back to the place that had been locked up and empty for half a year. When we moved in, we began to hear strange sounds and experience odd things that we couldn't explain. Eventually, we discovered an entire tribe of mythical beasts had been using our house as a crossroads of sorts while we were gone. When the virus situation started, one of our houses was in a busy, bustling neighborhood, and the other was located out in the country. Now, the country house is surrounded by other families who also were hoping to escape the pandemic, while our house in the suburbs is on a mostly deserted block, as everybody's out looking for a less crowded place to stay. I have to say, it's more than a little creepy to walk down the block in your fairly affluent neighborhood, where you know every family for a quarter-mile around by at least their last names, and to see 3 out of 4 houses dark and boarded up. There used to be kids out playing on our block every day past sundown all year round, even in the winter. They'd be out playing football in the rain and the snow, but now they're all off somewhere sitting in their rooms on their phones, quarantined, I suppose. Far be it from me to say I know better, but I know this has made a once friendly neighborhood seem scary and creepy and alien. It's not really much less unnerving in the daytime. It feels like I'm in a dystopian science fiction movie where more than half of the suburbs has been plucked up into the sky and nobody knows where anybody went. Or maybe it's the end times, and my family is one of the ones God and the devil haven't finished deciding the fate of. I don't feel comfortable anywhere around the neighborhood, and I don't feel safe in my own home. Everything is so strange, like we drove back to a parallel universe version of our house, or the evil version of our house, you know? Everything is just ever so slightly off, so you're never able to calm down. You feel tense all the time. I used to feel more relaxed during the day than I do in my sleep lately, and my family seems to feel the same way. There's just a baseline of weirdness here that never was present before. And then, on top of that, actually scary things began to happen. Our Aunt Esther came to stay with us when we moved back here because she had been all alone a few towns over. We gave her my wife's sewing room downstairs as her bedroom, while the rest of us slept up on the second floor. Aunt Esther kept telling us that there were men in the basement at night. The way she would tell us would make us laugh. She seemed to think they were ghosts or demons or poltergeists. It was different each morning, but over breakfast we'd be regaled with the crazy sounds that the men had made the night before. She would nap most of the afternoons away, blaming it on the men keeping her up at night, making noise in the basement underneath her bedroom. Aunt Esther is quite a character, and you can't ever tell when she's kidding around. She didn't seem at all alarmed, and she hadn't alerted the authorities about a prowler, so we figured she didn't mean it literally. Then, one morning, she told us that the ghosts were extra busy the previous night. She said they had been running in and out of the basement through the outside cellar door and keeping her up. She also said that a big dog with scary reflecting eyes was leaning on her window and staring at her at 3 o'clock in the morning. What I mean is, it was standing up on its hind legs and leaning on the window frame, looking in. She presumed that it was not actually standing bipedally. She assumed it was bracing itself against the house to prop itself up. At any rate, she said she told it to scat, but it kept staring at her, unmoving. She turned and slept, facing away from it, but could still feel it watching her. This one was different from the previous stories, and I began to feel as though Aunt Esther were being bothered by someone or something that was real. I asked her if she could sleep with my wife for a night so I could stay in her room and see what I heard. I heard nothing, and I slept through the night like a baby. But I'm a heavy sleeper, so I had my son, who we can call Melvin, try sleeping in there next, and poor Aunt Esther had to go sleep in Melvin's room. We kept smelling a terrible odor coming from the basement in the mornings, but when we would go down to investigate, we didn't see anything dead there, so we just shrugged our shoulders. Sometimes the odor was there, and some days it wasn't. We thought it was the toilet backing up or one of those kinds of things. We weren't sure what the source of the bad smell was, and I know I, for one, was a little squeamish about finding out. I had grown up in the city, and I honestly don't know what to do with a septic tank. The very idea of that is more frightening to me than Aunt Esther's men in the basement. After another couple of quiet nights, Melvin woke me and my wife up at 3:33 one morning, claiming that we had what he called a team of werewolves running maneuvers in our backyard. I asked him to add detail to that statement so that my sleepy mind could figure out if I was awake or dreaming. He said there were a bunch of big, muscular, hairy monster men with fierce expressions on their wolf-like heads. He said they were darkly colored dog-like creatures that stood up and ran on their hind legs. There were a number of them, but he couldn't tell how many out in the darkness. They ran with a sense of purpose, as though they knew what they were doing and had done it before. I turned on the light and looked in Melvin's eyes. They did not appear overly dilated. His breath did not smell like anything intoxicating that I was familiar with. He seemed very frightened, but he didn't seem to be drunk or hallucinating. I looked at my wife, and she was clearly thinking the same thing that I was. She told me impatiently to go down and investigate. Walking down those stairs that night was just about the last thing that I wanted to do. Either I was going to see a team of werewolves performing maneuvers, or I wasn't. In the first case, That meant the entire family was in danger because of something that wasn't supposed to be real. In the second case, it meant my son would have lost his mind. I couldn't root for either of those two outcomes, and I had no plan in my head for what to do in either circumstance. Melvin ran down the stairs and into his room, or I guess Aunt Esther's room. He hissed at me to hurry. He was looking at something out the window and waving his hand at me wildly. By the time I got there, I saw someone, big as a linebacker, running into our basement through the outside door to the cellar. I could feel the bumping downstairs that Aunt Esther had described for us repeatedly. I grabbed my son's cell phone off the nightstand and called 911. I told the police I had just seen a prowler run into the basement of our house, and they told us a car was heading out. Melvin was protesting the entire time, saying that we probably needed to call animal control. I wondered what these men had done to my son to traumatize him this way. He really thought we had werewolves in our basement. What could be more impossible than that? I had to stay on the line with the police until the officers arrived. They already knew to go to the cellar through the back way, and I saw them go in the same way that the large dark silhouette had gone. After some time, they emerged and rang the front doorbell. They reported to us that our basement smelled very bad, and we had to agree with them. They said they did not find anyone down there, but they did find something that they needed to show us. We invited them into the house and took the inside staircase down to the basement with the officers. They led us to a dark corner behind the water heater, and I noticed that the wall and floor appeared cracked. One of the cops leaned down and lifted part of the wall and floor out of place, revealing a cavity opening large enough for a big man to climb through. I was stunned. If there was a prowler here, I was informed, this is how he left. I wanted to know where it led to, but I could only see a few feet down into the hole, which looked as though it had been scratched out of the earth by hand. As we watched, the younger officer lowered himself down into the tunnel and disappeared. We waited, wondering when he would come back, or if he would. I had no idea what he was encountering and where that hole in our floor led to. The officer came back, though, to our great relief. He told us that it seemed there was a crack in the wall of the sewer tunnel under the street near our house. Someone or something took advantage of that crack to widen it, then began tunneling up through layers of soil and concrete. Eventually, whether by chance or design, they ended up boring into our basement, which they then had exited from, presumably just to bother Aunt Esther, and re-entered before the sun came up. For a long while, I wondered how they could have known to dig into my basement, but it eventually dawned on me that they were looking to get to the surface. If they had emerged in the woods, they'd have used that exit, same as where they did end up emerging. Still, our basement provided them with cover for literally months, so I still sometimes wonder if they somehow knew where they were digging after all. We were advised to have the hole sealed up, and I hired a very good company to do the job. I wanted it triple reinforced with metal plating that they couldn't hack through, whoever these people were. On the day when the workmen arrived to seal up the hole, I led them into the basement through the staircase in the house, and as soon as the three of us were standing there on the basement floor, and I was about to explain the situation to them, a huge man walked out of the darkness and stared at us all with eyes that glowed in the dark like lightning bugs. One of the workmen turned to say hello to whoever it was, and then his jaw dropped. In a second, all three of us realized that the individual who had joined our party was not actually a human being at all. We were staring at what my son had described to us. We were looking at a tall, dog-headed monster man, not a human in any sense of the word. It was bipedal, and it looked as though it might have been intelligent, but it was not like us in any way other than that. It had long, tall dog ears up on top of its head. I noticed it had a long dog tail descending down past its ankle when he wagged it one time, shooing away a fly the same way a horse might do it. That was the end of my sighting, as the three of us ran up those stairs like the Three Stooges. Upstairs, it was bright daylight, but it was still dark in that basement. I ran out back and opened up the outside door to the cellar to let the sunshine in, and encouraged that Dogman to head on back through that tunnel to the sewer he had emerged from. To their credit, the construction guys didn't quit the job. I know I would have. They did raise their price, but that was because when we saw that immense man-beast, we all knew the hole had to be extremely reinforced. That creature would be able to tear through concrete and get back in just like a rat could. We needed to make several plugs and double reinforce each one. At the end of the job, they contacted the township with me to request that the town look into funding the repair of the hole down there in the sewer that had started all this. We aren't allowed to fix that ourselves, or I would have been willing to pay for it. If this neighborhood wasn't scary enough, now we know that we have dogmen in our sewer system. It's only a matter of time before they find another escape hatch to come up to the surface through. If it's not through our basement, it'll be through somewhere else. It isn't safe to be here any longer, but at least there's no lockdown here, so in the short term it's the lesser of two evils. We're uncomfortable in either home because Dogman used our basement.
Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it. You can become a channel member by clicking the join link below. Then you can check our community page to find the links to 10 hours or more of secret, uncensored Dogman stories too wild to be told on this channel. Your other option is to join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. That's Peter's homemade club, where he will personally email you the links as well as occasional secret club messages. You may also be included as an executive producer in a future episode. You have a scary experience you want to tell us about? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com, or else call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LESS-SCARY. The machine cuts off every few minutes, so if you have a long story, please keep calling back and we'll piece it together later on. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.